I was still in my black dress when my parents asked me how much Kevin's life insurance paid. Not how's Ellie doing without her dad, just call. They came to the funeral, of course, late, whispering about parking, not pain. My father hugged me like he was closing a business deal. My mother dabbed dry eyes and asked if the house was too much for me now. But I kept quiet, because grief already takes so much out of you. You don't think you'll have to defend your dead husband from the people who once held you as a baby. But then came the real blow, a typed document, delivered in a sealed envelope, suggesting that I consider a fair distribution of the insurance payout. 50% to them. 15 to Sophia. They left me 35 for the child I was now raising alone. They called it fairness. I called it a betrayal dressed in pleasantries. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I simply poured myself a cup of coffee, placed the envelope on the counter, and told them to leave. But they didn't back down. They kept calling, texting, even showing up at Lily's school. And that's when something unexpected happened. Ellie got involved. She didn't cry. She didn't hide. She sat down at her little desk with markers and made them an invoice. One that listed every hug they never gave, every bedtime they missed, every moment they failed to show up. The total? $0. The value of real love? Priceless. When she handed it to them, their faces changed. But was it guilt or strategy? Because now they're saying they're sorry. They're asking to come back into our lives. But I've learned something since Kevin died. Love without respect is just manipulation.
So what do I do now, Gi?
3 months after that day, after Lily handed them an invoice that carried more truth than any adult conversation could, I thought we were done. I thought the silence from my parents meant they had finally understood. But people don't change just because you show them who they really are. Sometimes, they just change their tactics. It started with a letter, handwritten in my mother's familiar cursive, the kind she used on birthday cards when I was little. "We miss you," it read. "We made mistakes. Let's talk." A month later, a package arrived for Lily, astronomy books this time, not the pink tiaras she never liked. Part of me wanted to believe this was growth. The other part knew better. You see, grief isn't just about losing someone you love. It's also about losing the version of your family you thought existed. I've buried both. And yet, I said yes to a 15-minute visit, neutral territory, public space, boundaries made clear. They showed up early, dressed like they were going to church, with tight smiles and watery eyes. They asked Lily about school, remembered her favorite subject, complimented the star chart she made. It was strange, like watching actors perform a role they'd only just learned existed. And still, I kept waiting for the mask to slip. It didn't, at least not that day. But 2 weeks later, a second letter came. This time typed. This time with numbers. "We'd like to discuss a small monthly contribution to help with medical bills," it said. "Now that Kevin's assets are no longer at risk, it seems appropriate." There it was, the real reason. They hadn't changed. They had recalculated. And in that moment I realized, they didn't come to reconnect. They came to reaccess. To find a new route back into the financial security they thought they lost when I stopped answering their calls. I stared at the paper. Then at Lily's drawing still taped to the fridge, her little invoice for love never received. I thought of Kevin, of how hard he worked to protect us, not just with money, but with his values. And I thought of the promise I made at his graveside, to never let anyone use our grief as leverage. So now I ask you, how do you handle a family who says all the right things, but only when they think there's something left to take? I didn't expect them to show up at my house again, but they did. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after Kevin's funeral, I opened the door to find my parents standing on the porch, soaked and serious. No prior call, no heads up. Just two people who once asked for half my husband's life insurance, now holding a small box and saying, "Can we come in?" Part of me wanted to slam the door. But another part, the part that still remembered being their daughter, stepped aside. We sat in the living room, awkward and silent, the clock ticking louder than it should. My mother opened the box. Inside, old family photos I hadn't seen in years. Christmas mornings, backyard birthdays, even one of Kevin grinning beside my dad at our wedding. "We've been talking to someone," my mom said, voice softer than I remembered. "A counselor. She helped us see what we became." I waited for the request, money, access, something. But it never came. Not that day. Instead, they told me they missed Lily's laugh. They regretted the birthday party over the funeral. They admitted that their desperation had made them cruel. I wanted to believe them. I really did. But belief doesn't come easy after betrayal. I told them I needed time, boundaries, honesty. "We understand," my father said, and for the first time in years, he didn't argue. But life has a way of testing your trust right when it starts to regrow. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Lily's school. My mother had shown up, again, this time with a bag of gifts and a request to just talk to her for a moment.
No permission.
No heads up. Just another boundary crossed. That night, I called them. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said this: "You can't rebuild trust while stepping over the line every time it suits you. Either you respect my rules, or you lose your place in our lives for good." The next day, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No note.
No demands.
Just a check with void written across it and a small post-it. "We're starting over. For real this time." But I knew better now. Promises don't mean anything without action. And in a world where even grief gets weaponized, how do you teach people that love isn't a transaction? How do you forgive someone who only shows up after the damage is done and wants credit just for knocking? 3 days after that void check appeared in my mailbox, I received an email from Sophia, subject line, "Be better than this." I hesitated before opening it, already bracing for the familiar cocktail of guilt and deflection. But curiosity won. The message was as messy as she'd always been, a blend of backhanded apologies, veiled jabs, and a final request: "Can you at least convince Mom and Dad to let me see Lily? It's been hard not being included." Hard, I thought. She was the one who scrolled through Kevin's funeral like it was a boring lecture, the one who called me selfish when I refused to hand over Lily's future like it was a family coupon.
Still,
her message lingered in my mind, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because it reminded me of something Kevin once said. People don't always show you who they are in crisis. They show you who they've been all along. And Sophia? She'd always been good at needing things. Attention, money, validation. But accountability? Not so much. That night, Lily asked me why Aunt Sophia didn't call anymore. I paused, unsure how to frame betrayal in a way an 8-year-old could absorb. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "people make choices that hurt others. And until they understand what they did, we have to protect ourselves." Lily nodded quietly, as if that answer, though incomplete, made enough sense for now. The next morning, I replied to Sophia's email, not to reconcile, but to draw a line. "If you want to be part of Lily's life," I wrote, "you'll need to earn it. No drama. No back channels through our parents. Just you, taking real steps to show you've changed. Not for me. For her." I didn't expect a reply. But a week later, she showed up at the foundation I'd started in Kevin's name, unannounced, but not uninvited. She brought books for Lily, not glittery princess stuff, but real science kits, carefully chosen. I didn't know she liked space, she admitted. I never asked. It wasn't a full apology, but it wasn't nothing either. And maybe, just maybe, it was a start, because rebuilding isn't loud. It's slow, quiet, earned one moment at a time. But the real question is, how do you know when to let someone back in without handing them the tools to hurt you again? 2 weeks after Sophia showed up with those space kits, something unexpected arrived in the mail, a small package from my parents, postmarked from Arizona. No note. Just a box with Lily's name carefully printed on the front in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a pair of hand-knitted mittens in Lily's favorite color, deep purple, along with a folded card. For our little stargazer, love, Grandma and Grandpa. No demands, no guilt, just that. I stared at the card for a long time. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close to redemption. But it was different. Real. And that scared me more than another manipulative voicemail ever could. Because what do you do when the people who hurt you most start acting like they've changed? Do you lower your guard or raise it higher? I showed Lily the package, let her feel the yarn, soft and warm against her tiny fingers. She smiled, but said nothing. That night over cocoa, I told her the truth. Sometimes people make bad choices, and sometimes they try to fix them. That doesn't mean we forget what they did. But it does mean we watch and see if they're really trying. She looked up at me, serious beyond her years, and said, "So we give them a maybe, not a yes." I nodded, my throat tight. A maybe felt right. The next weekend my parents emailed, asking if they could visit Lily at a public park, supervised, no strings attached. I said yes with conditions, boundaries, rules, and they followed them. No talk about the past. No passive-aggressive digs, just quiet interest in Lily's stories about school and her recent obsession with constellations. My dad even brought a book on astronomy, dog-eared and worn, from his own college days. I didn't trust it. Not fully. But I couldn't deny the shift. The subtle way my mom asked about Lily's drawings, without redirecting the conversation to herself. The way my dad stayed silent when he used to dominate every room. They were trying. Or, at least pretending to try. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for a next step. But deep down, I kept wondering, were we healing, or were we just rewriting a quieter version of the same old story? A month later, just as the rhythm of cautious visits had begun to feel strangely normal, a letter arrived, this time handwritten by my father. No envelope, just a folded piece of lined paper slipped under my door while Lily and I were at the grocery store. The fact that he came by unannounced made my skin crawl. Inside, the message was short, almost too neat. "Rachel, we've been speaking to a financial planner. We think it's time to revisit the life insurance situation. Let's sit down like adults." That sentence shattered any illusion I had of progress. It wasn't a relapse, it was a reveal. The quiet visits, the mittens, the astronomy book, they weren't remorse. They were setup, a prelude to a conversation they'd never let go of. And this time, they weren't even hiding it. I sat at the kitchen table, that flimsy paper in my hands, and all I could hear was Kevin's voice from the letter he'd left me. Don't let them near Lily's future. He'd seen this coming before I ever did. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even rage. I just stood in front of the window as Lily brushed her teeth, watching the porch where my parents had once promised to change. And I made a decision. I emailed our lawyer Thomas and asked him to draft a formal no-contact notice with clear language about financial harassment. Then I sat Lily down and told her the truth. Sometimes people pretend to change just long enough to get what they want. But love doesn't ask for a share of your grief. It just shows up and stays. Her eyes widened, quiet and understanding. So they were still being fake. I nodded. Yes, baby. And this time, we're not giving out any more maybes. The next day, I blocked every number, every email. I updated Lily's school records to restrict pickup permissions. And when Aunt Barbara called to warn me about another family meeting being quietly planned, I simply said, we won't be attending. Because I wasn't just protecting a bank account. I was protecting peace. Kevin's peace. Lily's future. And my own spine, finally straight after years of bending. They thought they could circle back with softer words and sharper strategies. But now, I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was drawing the line, and this time it wasn't in pencil. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I opened my email and found a message that stopped me cold. The subject line read, Legal action, family dispute regarding insurance and estate. It was from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Mara, my Uncle James's daughter, someone who'd always kept to the sidelines during family drama. But what she wrote sent a chill through me. Rachel, I think you need to know. Dad's been talking to your parents about contesting Kevin's will. They've been trying to build a case that Kevin was coerced into leaving everything to you and Lily. I overheard them on a call.
I'm sorry.
I can't stay quiet anymore. My fingers went numb. Coerced? Kevin, who hand-wrote every detail of that will himself, who made sure every account was bulletproof, was now being dragged into a baseless narrative by the very people who had ignored his death to finish a birthday dinner. I forwarded the message to Thomas, our lawyer. And by nightfall, he had sent out cease and desist letters to everyone involved, reminding them in no uncertain terms of the legal protections in place and the consequences of harassment. But even as the law held its ground, my heart broke all over again. How low do you have to sink to twist a man's legacy into a weapon, just to steal from his grieving wife and daughter? That night, as Lily and I ate mac and cheese on the couch watching an old cartoon Kevin used to love, she looked up at me and said, "Will they leave us alone now, Mom?" I paused, unsure how to promise safety in a world where even family could become predators. "They might try again," I said gently, "but we're stronger now. We have people who will fight for us. We have each other." She nodded and leaned into me, her little body warm and tired. I stroked her hair, remembering Kevin's voice saying, "Rachel, protect her even when it's hard." And I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. About not letting grief become a door for others to walk through with greed in their hands. The legal battle might never come. Or it might arrive quietly, with signatures instead of slams. But either way, I was ready. Because when love is real, you defend it with everything you have. And I was done letting anyone rewrite our story. 3 months after that quiet, tentative bookstore meeting, something unexpected arrived in the mail, a plain envelope, no return address. But the handwriting was unmistakably my father's. Inside was a single letter, folded neatly, along with a photograph. The picture caught me off guard. Kevin and I, maybe 10 years younger, laughing in the backyard at a summer barbecue, Lily a toddler clinging to his leg. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. "Rachel," it began, "we've started therapy. Not because we were told to. Not because we're trying to win something back, but because we realized, too late, what we lost." I sat down at the kitchen table, stunned. It wasn't long, maybe 2 paragraphs. But every word was layered with a kind of humility I had never heard from them before. "We were wrong. About everything," the letter continued. "We didn't know how to show love unless it benefited us. And we see now that in doing so, we failed you, and we failed Lily." There were no excuses this time, no subtle justifications tucked between the lines. Just remorse and maybe the beginning of self-awareness. At the bottom, in my mother's familiar looping script, she had written, "We hope this can be the start of us listening, really listening for once." I didn't know what to feel. For so long, I'd lived with the ache of their absence, the sting of betrayal in moments that should have been filled with support. And yet, part of me ached to believe this could be real, that people could grow, that even old roots could push up new branches if they were willing to do the work. That weekend, I showed the letter to Marcus. He read it carefully, then looked up and said, "That sounds like the first real thing they've said in years." And when Lily saw the photo, her face lit up. "That's when Daddy tried to grill and almost burned the burgers." She giggled, a rare, pure sound. Then she looked at me seriously and asked, "Does this mean they're trying to be better?" I didn't answer right away. But later that night, as I tucked her in, I whispered, "Maybe. And maybe we can let people try again, without forgetting why we had to walk away in the first place." 2 weeks after that letter, I agreed to meet them, on my terms. A quiet diner halfway between our homes, public enough to feel safe, but personal enough for real conversation. I arrived early, choosing a booth in the back, heart racing with equal parts dread and fragile hope. When they walked in, I could see the change before a single word was spoken. My father, always so sure of himself, looked smaller somehow, humbled. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, not from drama, but from something closer to truth. They didn't hug me. They didn't reach across the table. They simply sat and waited. "Thank you for coming," my father said first, his voice lower than I remembered. "We've been trying to understand, not justify, not explain, just understand." I didn't speak. I needed to hear it all. My mother's voice broke the silence. "We've been meeting with a counselor who doesn't let us gloss things over. She asked us to write down every memory where we put Sophia first and you second." It was pages long. She looked at me directly. I didn't realize how cruel some of it sounded until I read it out loud. The honesty hit me like a cold wind, sharp, unexpected, real. And then, something I never thought I'd hear. "We don't expect forgiveness, Rachel, but we're asking if we can keep trying to be better." I studied them, waiting for the catch, the manipulation. But it never came. There was no mention of money.
No guilt trips.
Just two aging people stripped of pride, sitting across from the daughter they'd almost lost completely. I thought about Lily, about her wisdom beyond her years. The way she still asked if maybe someday they'd change. Maybe this was that someday. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I simply said, it has to be about Lily. If you want any kind of relationship, it starts with her. And it stays on my terms. My father nodded slowly. We understand. And for the first time in my life, I believed he did. As I left that diner, a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying began to shift. The road to healing wouldn't be smooth. But maybe, just maybe, it had finally begun. 3 weeks after the threat of legal action had been shut down, I received a letter in the mail. Not typed, not formal, but handwritten, almost trembling on the page. It was from my mother, Rachel. It began, "We've been seeing a therapist. We didn't understand how deep our actions cut until someone made us look at them without excuses." I read it twice, not out of hope, but confusion. The same woman who once asked if I could manage alone on the night Kevin died was now talking about empathy. She wrote about guilt,
About shame.
about finally recognizing that Lily had lost a father, and I had lost the only person who ever truly protected me. For the first time, she acknowledged what I'd been carrying alone. There was no request for money, no mention of family obligations, just the quiet question, would you ever consider meeting us, just once, even if it's only for Lily's sake? I didn't respond right away. I needed time to feel everything, suspicion, resentment, the whisper of something that almost felt like forgiveness, but wasn't quite there. That night, I sat in bed with Lily, who had fallen asleep clutching a picture of Kevin. I thought about what it would mean to let my parents near her again. Could they truly change? Or were they only reacting to the boundaries I'd drawn, trying to slip through a crack in the wall I'd built? A few days later, we were walking through the park when Lily turned to me and said, "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa miss Daddy too?" I hesitated. "Maybe," I said, "but missing someone doesn't always mean you love them the right way." She nodded, like she understood more than I ever had at her age. "If they say sorry like they mean it," she added, "we could maybe let them visit. Not inside the house, but like somewhere safe." Her words, so simple and careful, were like Kevin's voice echoing through her. She wasn't asking to forget, just to see if healing was possible. I took her hand, the cool breeze of early spring brushing our faces, and realized this wasn't about my parents anymore. It was about who we chose to be, even after being hurt. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to see if their remorse could finally match the damage they'd done.